publicist here at Left Bank Books. Tonight is a very special event for us. When our bookshop opened almost 17 years ago, a columnist for the Bangor Daily News wrote a story about our founding. That columnist is tonight's special guest, Robin Clifford Wood, who is celebrating today the release of her debut book, The Field House, A Writer's Life Lost and Found on an Island in Maine. It's very cool, Robin. We are equally happy to welcome another old friend of ours tonight, Christina Baker Kline, who will be joining Robin in conversation about books, writing, and writers. Christina is, of course, the best-selling author of numerous novels, including most recently The Exiles, as well as A Piece of the World, Orphan Train, and so many others. She is also a vocal supporter of independent bookstores. Thank you, Christina. It's lovely to see you again. I had the great fortune to read an early copy of The Field House late last fall. Before then, if you had asked me who Rachel Field was, I might have recognized her as the author of the 1929 children's book, Hitty, Her First 100 Years, but I'm not sure. What I am sure of is that reading Robin's hybrid memoir biography, in which she writes about how her life became intertwined with Rachel's, has turned me into a Rachel Field groupie. I defy you to read The Field House and not be captivated by this woman who was a poet, novelist, children's fiction author, playwright, screenwriter, and in her spare time, the person who wrote the English lyrics to the song Ave Maria for Walt Disney's classic film, Fantasia. The story of how the Field House came into being is an integral and mesmerizing part of the book, and I'm sure Robin will share that part of the story with you tonight. I'll just say that in the process of learning about Rachel, her life and legacy, Robin wondered why no one had ever told Field's story, why this smart, generous, warm, and talented woman had been, as Robin says, consigned to the vaults of oblivion. Thanks to Robin, the world is about to rediscover Rachel Field. In reviewing The Field House, Christina wrote that it is a meticulously researched and deeply felt book, a meditation on the nature of creativity. I feel richer for reading this lovely book. I couldn't agree more. Rachel and Christina, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm delighted to be here, and especially with Left Bank Books and all the wonderful things you all have done. What a heroic job this year. It's been very unusual, and you've weathered it so beautifully and with such grace. It's been a joy to be part of, actually. Not just, I was going to say to watch, but actually to take part in as well. And I'm delighted to be here with Robin Wood, whom I've known for a while. I think, Robin, you profiled me for the Bangor Daily News, and we had a really lovely, I remember, lunch in Northeast Harbor, Maine. And we've been in touch ever since. And I knew that you were working on this book for a number of years, but I finally had the great good privilege to read it before it was published. And you've heard, and you know, of course, what I think about it and how beautifully I think it turned out. So can you start by talking about just an overview of what this book is? We'll start from there.
Okay, so this book, Nancy gave a wonderful introduction, and I'm very grateful to Nancy and all of Left Bank Books and the Bangor Daily News for taking this on, and to you, Christina. I just am buoyed up by such a mountain of supporters, and this has been an incredible experience and just a sign to me of the goodness of human nature over and over again. But in terms of this project, I started in 2008 is when I actually got serious about writing this book about Rachel Field. But we bought her house on Sutton Island, which is one of the Cranberry Islands in Maine, off the coast of Mount Desert Island. We bought the house in 1994 on this tiny, mile-long island that we'd been going to for, well, my husband started going as a kid. He had a family house on this island, and when we had 4 very young children, we discovered a house for sale, which is quite unusual, where there's only 20 houses or so on the whole island. And when we first walked into it, I got shivers. I knew that it had been a writer's house, and there'd been actually other creative people besides Rachel who have lived in the house. But over time, and it took quite some time, I got particularly fixated on Rachel Field. And when I started inquiring into her history, there were so many vague stories and suppositions and unknown mysteries about what happened to her. Did she have, did she struggle with infertility? Did she have a child? Oh yes, I think she had a child, but where is that child? No sign of that child anywhere. And I think she had a sister, but then the sister seemed to disappear. And why did she get married so late in life at age 40? And as I started reading her poetry and her novels and looking into her story more, there were more and more questions that came up, and I became rather obsessed with her history. And I went on this treasure hunt all over the country to learn the secrets of Rachel Field's life. And here we are today. I credit Rachel with the writing life that I have cultivated since I've come to Maine. So I'm grateful to Rachel Field as well.
Oh, that's great. All right, now I have a whole lot of questions, as you might imagine, but I also know that you have some photographs, you have a poem, you have some excerpts from your own book, and I want to give you the opportunity to share some of those as we go. So, would you like to start by? I think maybe you were going to read a poem.
Yes, I'd like to start with my favorite Rachel Field poem, which is the first one I knew. It was not only connected to Sutton Island, but I actually found this same poem about islands in my great aunt's home on an island in a lake in upstate New York, where my family spent their summers. So this island poem connected many parts of my life and connected me to Rachel. And I think for many people, this was kind of the quintessential Rachel Field poem. And I think I can do it by heart. Let's see if I can just speak it to you.
Right.
If once you have slept on an island, you'll never be quite the same. You may look as you looked the day before and go by the same old name. You may bustle about in street and shop. You may sit at home and sew, but you'll see blue water and wheeling gulls wherever your feet may go. You may talk to the neighbors of this and that and close to your fire keep, but you'll hear ship whistle and lighthouse bell and tides beat through your sleep. Or you won't know why and you can't say how such change upon you came. But once you have slept on an island, you'll never be quite the same.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I know you say you could experience that poem anywhere, but it feels so Maine to me. It really does. So one of the things that interests me about Rachel Field that I've been wanting to ask you about is that she was very famous in her lifetime. She won the National Book Award, the Newbery Medal. She was successful in Hollywood. She ran in glittery literary circles. And then she died of cancer at the age of 47. And since then, her, we talk in the world of books about the ups and downs of literary reputations, but nobody really knows who she is, or few people, I should say. Of course you do, and I'm sure there are others, but why is that, do you think? What is it about her now?
My sense that I came to over time about why Rachel Field disappeared was because of heartbreak. Because I don't want to give everything away from the story, but her death, I only read the word cancer in one tiny newspaper account of her death. Everywhere else, there was this vague, died of complications after surgery. And it was very, very sudden. No one had known she'd been ill in any way. And there was a lot of tragedy surrounding her death. And not long after that, there was tragedy piled on top of tragedy. And I think her husband was devastated, and also quite private. And even though he carried Rachel's torch in terms of keeping up the copyrights on her work for quite a long time, I think when it came to and in fact, a close friend of Rachel Fields wrote a full biography of Rachel's life. And I even read accounts of the sequence of her discovering things about Rachel and writing out this biography of Rachel Fields' life, and no sign of it. And I'm convinced that it's because the final blow of follow-up tragedy to Rachel's death happened right when she was finishing her book, and it was supposed to go to press and then disappeared. So my sense is that it just became too painful, and the memories of Rachel Field kind of got shut down. So that's part of my theory.
Yeah, and does your work sort of studying her and her publications convince you that she should be better known than she is?
I think she should be better known, and this is a funny thing to confess, but I wouldn't say that Rachel Field's literary stature should put her in the high canon of writers of all time. I love her poetry more than anything. I love the spirit of it. I love her voice, the delight in nature, the delight in humanity, in life in the world. I find it hugely uplifting, and that would be the thing I think people should touch upon. I also love a lot of her novels. She was a great storyteller, but the thing I wanted people to recognize was the life that she led more than the literature that she wrote.
Well, and the way the book is constructed, and some of you are probably lucky enough to have read it already, is as a kind of conversation. You're writing letters to her. It's a blend of biography and memoir, which is really unusual. It seems like a complicated thing to figure out how to structure a book like this so that you're telling a story about someone who seems worthy of contemplation. And then you're also weaving in your own experience and your own experience of her, and your sort of responses to her. So how did that come together for you? And were there other books that you used as models as you were working that sort of were doing a similar thing?
I started looking at books that combined somehow some level of memoir or self-referential prose within biography, and there are fewer than you would imagine. And actually, the idea of the letters came quite late in the game. It took me 2 years to find a publisher for this book, partly because Rachel was not that well known, and people said, sounds like a cool story, but she's not a known name, so I just don't know if we can sell the book. And I had a revelation at a writing conference. So I think you're never too old to have a writing teacher teach you something. And the prompt.
I'm sorry, but just for our viewers, was it Stony Brook? Where were you for the writers conference?
It was the IOTA Short Prose Conference on Campobello Island, which was set up by Penny Geisinger. I'm not sure what's up with them since COVID, but I went 2 different years, and it was a fantastic writing conference. And the guest faculty was Dinty Moore, and he gave this writing prompt that said, write a letter to someone who will never read it, or something along those lines, or write a letter to someone that you will never send and that the person will never see, or something along those lines. And I had been struggling with the Rachel Field book, and I decided to write a letter to her. Actually, I think the first line I wrote was, "Dear Rachel, are you mad at me?" Because I also wondered how she'd feel about my revealing all of these secrets of her life. And that opened the floodgates to something that I think I had been struggling, that I'd been holding back. And somehow it just felt like it completed the whole story once I was able to weave in my voice without inserting
Interrupting
it.
the narrative, sort of,
Yeah,
without.
without inserting it into her story. I brought my story, alongside it. So
It's kind of
um,
a gentle critique in some ways, or like, for example, in one letter, you talk about how Rachel Field, to her, one letter to her, you talk about how she is better known for her children's books
yeah.
than for her adult fiction. And you sort of muse about how she might have felt about that, which I thought was interesting. How do you think she would have felt about that?
Well, since she had just brought a child into her life, she had adopted a baby girl. I think she was beginning to write more juveniles, as they called them back then. So maybe she would have been happy with it, but she was itching to go beyond children's literature. I think the writing she would have done more of, that I wish she could have, would have been more novels.
Yeah, I got a real sense that she was wanting to sort of be in the big leagues,
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
was very ambitious,
Mhm.
it seemed. And that for a lot of reasons, some of which have to do with gender, she wasn't able to, break through in the way that I think she hoped. And of course, her life was cut short. Goodness knows there are plenty of people writing past the age of 47. So,
Yeah.
would you like to read some of your prologue? I know it's very vivid, and maybe that would be a nice.
Right. This might be a good introduction for the general gist. In 1994, my husband and I purchased a long abandoned wood frame house on an island off the coast of Maine. In the 1920s and 30s, it had been the summer house of author Rachel Field on the island that inspired all her most successful work. The poetry, plays, children's books, and novels that took her from struggling writer to Newbery medalist, National Book Award winner, then rising Hollywood success. At the peak of her renown, she died suddenly and unexpectedly, leaving so many stories untold, including her own. When I first walked into the island home that had been her magical place, her muse, some of those stories reached out tendrils, looking for a place to attach themselves. I felt their presence in the flutters of my heart, but didn't know at the time what it meant. Many people know the sensation of entering an old house and feeling something of its history in the air. It whispers from the corners, buzzes indecipherably in the motes of dust illuminated by a ray of sunlight through wavy glass. The building retains some indefinable quality left behind by its former inhabitants, some of their energy lingering in the atmosphere. I'll leave it at that for now.
It's actually such a perfect segue into my next question,
Okay.
which is, how did the fact that you were walking the same floors, you maybe using the same sink, I'm not sure, shape the direction of the book or shape your experience of writing it? And related to that, did you feel that you couldn't change things in the house, or did you not worry about that? I mean, were you trying to sort of keep it the way it was?
Yeah. Well, my husband and I tend to keep things the way it is. People partly just, well, also the house was in terrible shape. So the biggest projects we had were to, put a new roof on it, build new brick piers to hold the house up, replumb it. So, and those projects were such a big ordeal that the idea of redoing, interior decorating was really not much of a part of it. So it's still quite authentically similar to what it was. The furniture is the same, and a lot of it predated Rachel. I mean, there's no roads on this island. You walk with either a backpack or a wheelbarrow with your stuff, and to have work done, you have to bring in barges, or it's a huge ordeal to have anything significant done. So yeah, I think I slowly started to recognize which books were hers on the shelves. Some had her name in it. One of the coolest things, I opened one of the books and there was this cardboard cutout, and I realized it was one of her. It was a cardboard cutout that she used to create a silhouette illustration. And in fact, I think Alyssa might have a photo in the collection I sent her of a silhouette illustration of a bunch of children and trees. And this is in the guest book in the house next door. So she gave gifts to people all the time. So I found mail with her name on it. There's galley proofs from a poetry collection, and I get shivers even telling you about it. I felt like, yes, there we go. Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
So she made these beautiful silhouette illustrations. She created lampshades and did a lot of the illustrations for her own books in these silhouette art. And this came from my neighbors, the Rosenthals, who shared this with me. It's still in their guest book in their big house, and so a thank you to them for that. Yeah, it's quite charming, that work, and to see the car. I mean, to know she cut this thing out with her own hands, and I stuck it back in the pages of the same book and put it on the shelf. I mean, we really have kind of left stuff as she had it when she lived there. So I think about her when I use this old ceramic bowl and I'm making blueberry tea cake. I wonder if she made her stuff in this same big old ceramic bowl here. And I think about her a lot. I mean, I felt like I was there with her. It was really, she's, over my shoulder in the middle of the night. I read her poems, and she'd write about waking up in the middle of the night and having these thoughts and hearing the ocean in the background. And I thought she was right here having those very thoughts. So I mean, it really, I inhabited that space, and I felt like she was, inside me.
And so do you feel that it did affect your fiction? It sounds like, I mean, your memoir did, and biography.
No question. There's no question it had a deep influence on the whole process. In fact, my mom, who was still living when I started this project, got to read the first 3 or 4 chapters, and she said, "Robin, it's so interesting," because she had read a lot of Rachel Fields stuff too, and she said, "Your voice sounds so much, it reminds me of Rachel Fields' voice in her writing," which was not at all intentional, but it was kind of cool to me that I think she was getting her voice was getting into me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It actually sounds immersive.
Yeah.
Really immersive. Okay. I just want to remind people that you have the opportunity, and there are lots of you here, but you have the opportunity to ask anything you want of Robin. And we're going to stop at 7:40 in about just over 10 minutes to take your questions. So please put them in the chat, because that's the best way to get them out to you. I'm sure people are going to ask lots of things that I forget to ask. You alluded earlier to the fact that, and I know it because it's right around the corner from me. Sutton Island is not the easiest place to get to, or even to navigate when you're there, and that you walk, and getting house repairs done is even difficult. You can't go out for a carton of milk.
No.
You really have to plan ahead. So, and it's you even said, I think we were chatting with someone when you came I'm on Mount Desert Island, you came, and we went on a walk the other day. We ran into somebody, and you were talking about not even being able to dock there so easily.
No.
And I was just thinking, that's a very specific kind of place. What drew you there, and what keeps you there now, even now, with all of the sort of difficulties in getting there and being there?
I think the difficulties of it are a big part of the appeal. In fact, we've just had a big family debate in the last couple of years about high-speed internet, because it arrived on Sutton Island, and the question is, are we going to install it in our house or not? I mean, it's kind of there, and it's nearby. There's another family cabin near us that does have it, and we opted not to put it in the field house because it's a back to the essentials. There's no dishwasher. We do have appliances, refrigerator and stove, but we used to hang all our laundry out to dry, and still do, unless it's pouring rain. So it housekeeping is simpler, and you are with yourself and with each other in this very concentrated, uninterrupted way.
Sort of elemental.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, oh, did your husband want to say something?
He said you have to walk a mile to get from the town dock to the house. So
You're welcome to join us, by the way.
if he was going to watch from upstairs, but when there's a second person on a Zoom call, it often interferes with my connection, so I didn't dare. So
even in Hamden.
Yes, even in Hamden.
Even in Hamden.
Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about Sutton, I was also thinking about May Sarton's life and her journals and what she's written about solitude and the kind of choice to be removed in a way. And I also thought, you and I talked about my friend Alex Kate Schulman, who wrote Drinking the Rain, which is about her summers on a very remote Maine island and her joy in being there and sort of braving the elements.
On my bedside table. Can't wait to read it now.
Yeah, she's fantastic. That'll be great. And she's such a role model. She's almost 90 and she's still writing. And she just published a huge book on feminism this year. One wonderful thing I think about this book is that it's published by She Writes Press. And I actually coincidentally have been involved with them from the beginning. I was on their advisory board, and the editor-in-chief is a good friend of mine. And I think they're doing amazing work getting out books by women that are incredibly interesting, and perhaps the mainstream presses are just too commercial for, but this book feels like a perfect fit for She Writes Press. Do you feel that yourself? Are people reach you?
Sorry. It's all kinds of interruptions here. So do I feel what as well? Please, sorry about that.
Are you happy to be at this press? I'm thinking of people in the audience who might be writers also. Yeah. And who.
Oh, I thank you very much for bringing up She Writes Press. The fact that they believed in this book and in me and took it on made me so grateful after a long search process. And I am incredibly proud of all the things they're doing. But more than anything, they've connected me to this this sisterhood of authors, and I have these close friends that I have been talking to online for a year now, and where we sharing this experience of publishing through them in this same year, and it's an incredible network of support and advice and generous help with time and reading each other's books and blurbing each other's books. And I mean, that's an incredible model that makes the She Writes experience, even way beyond just the publishing of a book.
Yeah, it seems very dynamic. And in this time of COVID, especially, I think many of us have taken lessons that we'll learn from and keep working with, like, for example, the kinds of groups that have sprung up, support groups. Like, I know She Writes has a Facebook group of their authors that's private, and you can really keep in touch with people that way. And it just seems like a great way to network. And I don't really like the word network. It's more like to sort of expand your world of your writing world.
Yeah.
And find allies.
Yep. And I have two friends, Suzanne Simonetti and Judith. Oh my gosh. I'm blanking on her name. And of course I know her very well, but my brain scrambled. Two women who are both publishing today, also book releasing today, have been with me from day one. So shout out to them as well.
That's great. Okay, Robin, I have more questions, but I also know you have some photos and you have another thing to read. So what would you like to do right now? What would be most?
I think I think I'd love to just show a couple of pictures of the house so people can see the house. I think there's one shot of the porch looking out to sea we can start with, and there's another one looking at the house from the rocks. And that just might be nice for people to have a picture of the place.
Give me just 1 second here.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. So that we'll probably leave it at that, but that gives you a sense of the rugged front of the house and how close it is to the sea. What you're looking at, in fact, in the foreground would be underwater at high tide. So the house is really quite close to the water.
We
And
can see more if I know you have a few here, if you want to show others.
okay, yeah.
Interesting.
Robin, I can, do you want me to just kind of scroll through the pictures and you can
Sure, go ahead and scroll through the pictures and I'll just give you a quick sense of what and there's my daughter and my granddaughter on the steps there, by the way. And there's my husband and one of my dogs on the porch looking from behind the house out towards the sea. And Rachel spent a ton of time on that front porch as well. There's Rachel and her sidekick Spriggan. She had Scotty dogs for 20 years and loved them. And there she is on Sutton Island with Spriggan. And I didn't talk much about her. She was very self-conscious about her physique. She was a larger than life woman, large in stature. They said she looked just like her dad. And interviewers even wrote about being startled when they met her because they expected some very sprightly person based on her voice and her poetry. And I never even read what her height was. I think she probably kept that secret. And yeah, you've seen her silhouette illustrations. And that's me on the ferry. I'm down to only one dog, sadly, but we've often had a passel of them. And that's how we ride out to Sutton Island. I've got my backpack on, ready to go. And there's a sunrise scene of the coast of Sutton. And that's another one of my favorite sunrise shots from a walk around the island. No, that's a sunrise. Thank you.
It's pretty easy to see what you love about it.
Yeah. It's a pretty special place.
So Robin, did anything surprise you as you were working on this book? Did you come across things that were just either changed your perception of Rachel or the project itself?
There were many huge surprises along the way, but I think the biggest things were when these uncanny coincidences would come about that somehow felt impossible to not have somehow been orchestrated by the fates. And I always feel funny saying so, but I mean, I was a full-time mom. One of the things I feel like this book is about was the validation of life choices and embracing the path that you follow. Because I felt that I had given up my aspirations to becoming a writer because I stayed home full time for 25 years, pretty much with being, and I adored being a mother. I still consider it my first career and my favorite career. And having children on Sutton Island was one of the hugest pulls too, children in nature, in their most natural state. But then Rachel seemed to step in. She wanted to be a mom and a writer too. And it took her until she was well into her, until she was 40 years old to become a mom. And in ways I feel like we completed each other's dual longings.
That's so nice, yeah.
Yeah, and so I try to tell this quickly, but there was one thing that was on the shelves of the field house. Is this thing? It's a Wanamaker's diary. It's this old-fashioned journal catalog advertising thing on the shelves of the field house. And the 1928 version had some entries from Rachel Field's mother in August of that year, and it said, "Rachel and Lyle, all devotion. She has an almost maternal care of him." And for years, I had no idea who Lyle was. She married a man named Arthur when she was 40. And I learned a lot about Arthur. There was also huge heartbreak in so much of her later poetry. And nothing about Arthur seemed to suggest that it had anything to do with him. And so about, this book came and went out of my radar a lot. I say it took 13 years for this book to come about, but I put it away for even a year at a time. and then something would throw it back in front of me again, a call from an archive librarian, a request for information. But anyway, this one summer, I had 2 weeks before I was about to leave for New Orleans with my youngest daughter, who was transferring to Tulane. And so I pulled out my notes about Rachel Field, once again, and I found the name of someone named Lyle Saxon. And I said, I wonder if that could be the Lyle. He was just a writer of the time. And in the ages of the internet, I quickly was able to contact his biographers. 2 people had written biographies about Lyle Saxon. And the second one just was flabbergasted. She said, I can't believe you live in Rachel Field's house. I have read 30 of the most incredible letters I've seen in my life. And from Rachel to Lyle, they're publishable, they're incredible. And I almost wrote a biography about her myself. And those letters are a big reason why I wrote my biography. And I said, oh my gosh, so where are these letters? And she said, they're in the archive at Tulane University. And,
oh my God.
and I was stunned. I said, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks. So there we went. And instead of moving my daughter into her new apartment, I hauled her in as my research assistant, and she helped me read some of these amazing letters. And that was like a huge breakthrough for me. And it just felt so incredible. Things like that kept happening. So those were really a lot of the big surprises along the way that felt like I was being drawn in.
I do think that's one of the things about writing fiction, particularly fiction that requires research, which is that you have to get deeply immersed, and then things like that happen. It's sort of like all the deep work that comes in first yields these amazing coincidences and surprises. And it's one of the joys of writing a book that requires research, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I know you've done a lot of research too. And I feel like I could research forever. And I was lucky to find someone. I said, how do I know when my research is done? And he said, the research is never done. You just have to start writing.
You got to put the books down.
Yeah.
Well, that was okay. So I know I said we'd stop, but I have one more question for you. What do you think the hardest part of the book to write, or either you put it off for a while and you didn't want to do it, or you just found it really difficult when you were in the middle of it?
That's very easy. And it was the end of the book, and it was because it took me a while to recognize that the obstacle was that I was grieving, and I couldn't bear to write her death. And there was a year that I took off during my mother's final year of life, and I wrote feverishly that year, and actually wrote a whole book that I haven't gone anywhere with, but it may just stay with me. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but I wrote about the world of end of life and what our choices are and what we do, but also about my relationship with my mom. And
you did write a beautiful article about it.
Oh yes, I'm very proud of that. It's called "How Do You Help Your Parents Die?" and it's in Solstice Literary Magazine. And that was after my father died a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
And in any case, after I'd finished doing that, explosive writing about my mom, I got back to the Rachel Field notes. And this is another odd coincidence. My mother died on March 15th, 2014. And I took note, the Ides of March, this is a really big deal. And when I pulled out my notes for Rachel, after I'd finished my grieving year and my writing year, I opened up to those final pages of Rachel's life and was reminded that she died on March 15th. And it was another one of those I got shudders again, and I said, oh my God, I think if I could write my mother's death, I can write Rachel's. And then amazing. I kind of powered through the end.
And then you powered through. And the result, isn't it amazing to say that you have it's all in here. And I just have to show people that your daughter made this, right?
Oh, yes.
This beautiful bookmark to go with
She's
it.
got she's got an Etsy site.
Yes.
AK Wood, Thread and Water.
I know, it's so perfect. And you also have these amazing postcards. You're very professional.
I've got a lot of models.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a tremendous accomplishment. I'm really honored to be here with you tonight. And I'm so thrilled that other people are going to get the chance to read this and dwell in this world the way those few of us who've already read it have gotten to do. All right. I know I'm hogging you, so I think we should open it up. And the lovely woman from the Bangor Daily News, I think, is going to ask you. I'm happy to ask questions, but I think she's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, Christina. If you see some questions in the chat that you'd like to pose, I'll start them off, but maybe we can go back and forth. It's up to you. I mean, it's
Great.
See how it goes.
I'll start off a couple questions together. What year was the house built, and what years did Rachel live in that house?
It was built in 1898, and she bought the house in 1922. She first stayed in a different house on Sutton Island. She first came to Sutton Island in 1911. So she'd been going there for quite a long time when she bought her own place. And she owned the field house, which she called the Playhouse, from 1922 to 1939 or so. And she sold it because they adopted this daughter and were committed to staying in California. And her mom and aunt were getting a little too old to go out there on their own. And she let it go to friends.
Were you working on this book when you were at Stone Coast?
Absolutely. It was one of the big reasons I applied to this MFA in creative writing, because I thought maybe it would help me finish this friggin' book. It's taken me forever to get through.
Robin, can you talk a little bit about how you chose what's on the cover of the book?
Oh, well, hats off to the She Writes Press design team. So yeah, I sent them a lot of photos of Sutton Island, and you saw that silhouette of sunrise, and you could see that it looks quite a bit like this. And so, sorry, you can see it. They shared a bunch of options with me, and this was the one I chose of the images they selected, but also the inset in the middle. This silhouette of the girl in the house is one of Rachel Field's silhouette illustrations from one of her books. And I really wanted to have one of those on the cover of the book. So yeah, they incorporated that all in there quite beautifully.
I have a couple of doll related questions.
Mm.
What is the wooden doll Hitty's backstory, and where is she at present? And then did you see any evidence of Rachel's love of dolls through a collection or any toys that she bought for her young daughter?
Her daughter was only 2 when Rachel died. So I don't know that I didn't read reference to dolls for her daughter, Hannah. However, she had a very significant doll collection of her own. And I included in the book, there's descriptions of Emily Roxana and some others of her dolls that are in a display case in her New York City apartment where she lived during much of the year. The Hitty doll is in the Stockbridge Library in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And I have seen her, but she's under glass. So I wasn't able to hold her in my hands, but she's only about this big. The Hitty doll is quite tiny, and I found that really surprising. But yeah, for many people, the Hitty doll, based on who was the protagonist of her famous children's book, was the thing that that connected them to Rachel Field forever. Lots of doll enthusiasts are big Rachel Field fans.
I just want to thank everybody. We've got a lot of questions, and we're going to try to get through them all, but I'm trying to go kind of in order of how people asked and not miss any. Which Rachel Field books would you suggest that we read?
If you're talking about novels, For grown-ups, Time Out of Mind is my favorite. It's set on the Maine coast. It's beautifully written. I love that book. But I like all of her novels. To See Ourselves, she co-wrote with her husband, and I found it mostly fascinating because it paints this cool picture of early 1930s Hollywood, which is what she was living at the time as well. All This in Heaven Too, of course, was made into an Oscar-nominated, Best Picture nominated movie with Bette Davis and Charles Boyer, and that's also a great book. So that's And Now Tomorrow. I liked all of her novels. Of her children's books, Calico Bush is my favorite, actually more than Hitty.
Great. Did Hannah have a nanny or caretaker that Rachel chose to somewhat look after Hannah after Rachel's death?
After Rachel's death, a woman named Rilla Palmberg took on Hannah, and Arthur and Hannah lived with her. I think the dad actually almost lived in a separate apartment, at least in one of the houses later on. And this woman, Rilla Palmberg, raised Hannah pretty much from day one. But there were other friends of Rachel's who tried to step in and help, but one of them died, when when Hannah was still on the young side too. So, yeah.
This may be a spoiler question, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but Nancy asks, so what was Lyle's relationship with Rachel and what happened to them?
Well, I think you'll have to read the book for that.
Okay. There's a couple of Lyle questions in here, actually. Someone has asked, what's your next project that you're working on?
I'm waiting for something to bubble to the top. I've thought about revisiting this book about my mom. I definitely want to reread that. I've been reading books again about how we die, how we handle death and grief. It's kind of a close to the heart project for me and my husband. It's just an area we care about. But I also would love to work on more poetry, which is absolutely delightful and super fun for me. I'm going to a poetry retreat in Maine in June. And so those are probably two of the top things I'm hoping to get to work on.
Great. There's just a lot of comments. Everybody's just saying lovely book and everything like that. So sorry. Let's see. Oh, someone was asking, they had gone to an indie bookstore in Chapel Hill and found that they are not out yet from She Writes Press, I guess. I know that you're in the process of a second pressing. Is that correct? So some of these stores are sold out currently, correct?
Yeah. They went into a second printing, kind of surprised everybody. And I'm afraid that, they should be coming soon, because they put out the order for the second printing a couple of weeks ago. So it's more a question of getting the newly printed books shipped out, and they should be coming soon. So hang on.
Do you live on Sutton Island year round? No,
Sutton is I'd call it a 3-season place. It's mostly a summer place. There's no way to keep the water from freezing in the winter. It's very rocky, ledgy, so the water goes over land. So you kind of have to leave after the freeze.
Have any fans, now that your book is coming out and more people are learning about Rachel, have any fans asked to come and stay at the house? Have you been kind of having to share Sutton Island?
Not so far, and I don't see that happening. But it's pretty inaccessible. But we certainly love having our friends and family there. I have a very big growing family. There's 11 of us now, including my new granddaughter, and they're probably going to fill the place up most of the time.
Wonderful. I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing. Did you want to play that excerpt or not?
Well, it's, I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I guess. yeah, let's play a little bit of it. This was a thrill for me, and I should mention Bruce Commuson he lived on Cranberry Island in the Cranberry Isles. He was from Great Cranberry. He was one of the first people who really broke me open in this research, and he was a fan even beyond me still. He had this incredible Rachel Field collection and was behind the founding of a Rachel Field and Hitty Corner in their historical society room. It's a beautiful, beautiful space on Great Cranberry Island. And he somehow dug up this recording of Rachel Field on a radio show in probably around 1938. And this is the only time I've ever been able to hear Rachel's voice. And it was an incredible thing for me. She was raised properly and had a very cultivated accent. But to hear her laugh and hear her voice was a thrill for me. So I'm going to play that for you. Maybe not the entire thing, but just to give you a sense of it. Let's see. Can you see it?
Now, we have another star graduate of the Little Red Schoolhouse, one of our girls who has written one of the country's best-selling novels. I'm sure you've all read All This and Heaven, Too. If you haven't, you ought to, because it's a great book. It's written by Rachel Field. Come right up here, Rachel. Good evening, my dear. We're all mighty proud of you, Rachel. Imagine you being a great writer. Little Rachel Field, who was always getting ink on her fingers. Tell me, didn't you used to wear your hair long down your back when you were in school, or was it in pigtails?
Oh, I wore them in 2 pigtails down my back. They used to get in the ink wells on the desk in back of me.
Oh, yes, I know. Well, you grew up to be a mighty good-looking woman, Rachel, and I wish all our scholars turned out so smart. I declare I talked to one of our boys a week or 2 ago, and he didn't know any more than he did when he was in the 5th grade. I asked him some questions about literature. And, my goodness, I guess they're going to make a moving picture out of your novel, Rachel, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, it goes into production this summer.
Mm-hmm. You going to write it for the movies yourself?
No, I'm working on a new novel.
Oh, I see. Well, you ought to try writing for the movies, Rachel. One of our boys is doing that very thing, and he's just started at it. He's doing pretty well. In fact, he's ahead of the game. He sent in 2 manuscripts to Hollywood, and they've already sent him back 5. Well, I understand our favorite recitation, or your favorite recitation, is that beautiful poem by Eugene Field, one that is beloved by all children from 6 to 60, called A Dutch Lullaby.
Yes.
That's its proper title, though many people call it Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. And I think that calls for a little music in back of it, don't you, Rachel?
Yes, I do. Winkin', blinkin', and Nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe, sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. Where are you going and what do you wish? The old moon asked the 3. We've come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we, said Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod.
I think I'm going to stop it there just because we only have a couple of minutes left. But I just was smitten when I got to hear her voice. I've listened to that 100 times. So for me, it was a huge thrill. And I'm sad Bruce Commuson did not live to see this book come out.
Thank you for playing that. That was wonderful. That was lovely to hear. There are a couple more questions. Did Rachel stay in contact with her sister throughout the years?
On and off. Her sister suffered with mental illness and was institutionalized for quite a while. And it was often attributed to a deep-rooted sibling rivalry that somehow set her off balance, but it seems hard to blame it on that. But yeah, it was a rocky relationship, it seems.
Someone just commented that she's related to Audrey Hepburn.
I don't know. Tell me. I'd love to hear about that. I don't know about that.
Actually, I think that's all. I think that's all the questions that we have. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us before we close this out?
Christina, did you have anything? No. Okay.
Oh, you're on mute, Christina.
Oh.
Sorry. Oh, Christina, you're on mute.
I couldn't unmute myself for some reason.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying I think we're too close to the end here, but I loved that recording and could have listened to the whole thing. It was great.
Okay, well, I will, I've got a bunch of other online events, and I
Yeah.
would love it if people would come to those, and I'm hoping to mix things up a bit each time. So, and I hope I'll have time to do, you know, more readings or play that whole recording and all that kind of stuff. And I must thank my family and my friends and so many people I haven't even met who have stepped up to help me so incredibly with sending the word out about this book. I'm so humbled by the generosity of many, many people and other writers like you, Christina, and Susan Conley, who's doing a talk with me on May 20th, and Melanie Brooks at the end of June. And all of the, you know, libraries and places that have taken, you know, have stepped up and ordered my book. And I've got my in-person opening at Edith Dyer Library in Hamden on Friday, and Deb Lozito has been a great supporter to set that up, even though they're not even able to have people in the library yet, but it's all going to be outdoors. I don't know, I could go on, but I can't say enough about how grateful I am to everybody, and what an incredible ride this has been.
Well, it couldn't happen to a better, more deserving person for a more interesting book. And congratulations. I think everyone here shares me in sending love and joy to you and saying, my God, you did this. This is amazing, Robin. Congrats.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it. And yes, go ahead, send your questions. And if any new information rises up from the depths about Rachel Field, I would love to fill in any blanks that are still remaining.
Great. Well, Robin, you're receiving a lot of praise and love in the chat from everybody. So thank you so much. This has been lovely. I really appreciate it. And congratulations. Nancy, I think you wanted to say something quickly before we sign off here.
So quickly, now you all see why you read this book and you become a Rachel Field groupie. Thank you, everyone. We have a limited number, but we do have signed copies of The Field House here at Left Bank Books. I won't say how many, but first come, first serve. You can call, you can email, you can go onto our website, and you could do it the old-fashioned way and actually stop in. We're open 7 days a week, year-round, and we ship all over the world. Thank you. Congratulations, Robin. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder,
Robin,
this event was recorded, and so everybody that registered for the event will be receiving an email next week with recordings, so you can rewatch it and enjoy it again. And yes, thank you again, Robin. Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you so much. This was lovely. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Have a good night.
Bye, Robin.